is RPPR episode 78, base rating 101. And this is Ross Payne here with Role Playing Public Radio. And with me, as always, Tom Church.
Yep, just watching your head kind of jerk forward with every one of those words.
Yes.
You have a powerful voice.
It's been a little while since we've done an episode, and I apologize for that, you loyal listeners out there, because I've been waiting until we could launch the next RPPR Kickstarter project, which is what this episode is about. Base Raiders, which will be our first standalone role-playing game that will be available as an actual book that you can buy and hold and
it's going to be a thing,
hug.
A physical thing.
Yes, a physical thing.
You can sleep with it.
Yeah, okay.
Take it to bed with you.
So it
will comfort you.
Yes. Base Raiders, superpowered dungeon crawling. We'll talk a lot about it this episode. This is going to be about architecture and place, the idea of a dungeon, what makes them interesting, why do we have them in role-playing games, that all that kind of fun stuff, thematic stuff. So Base Raiders is going to be based on the Heroes of New Arcadia. It's going to be a standalone role-playing game, but if we meet certain stretch goals, there will be conversion guides for other superhero role-playing games. So we're going to base the game engine on the Fate RPG, which Spirit of the Century, Dresden Files, Icons, a role-playing game. Kerberos Club from Arc Dream has a Fate edition, and a few other. There are quite a few other role-playing games out there that use Fate. So I'm very interested in learning it. I've been reading it quite a bit and learning, using it for this project. So this will be a lot of fun. And so check out the Kickstarter link, which will have all the info about the project itself. We'll be talking a little bit more about it, but I promise this is not just going to be a sales pitch for Base Raiders.
He promises.
There will actually be content in this episode. This is not buy my eventual book.
It's a theoretical book.
Yeah. So moving onwards, we're got a couple other bits of news. For Zombies of the World, this is October, Zombie Month, and so I've created got a programmer to create a zombie survival and risk analysis quiz. So you can go to zombiesoftheworld.com/quiz and take a quiz to see how well you do in a zombie apocalypse. This measures your sort of personality, your aptitudes, your skills, and not only will you be told what your chance of survival is, it'll also rate you against various species of the undead. So you can see how well you do against revenants, how well you do against talking zombies, and against human threats like the insane religious fanatics and
with guns.
Yeah, and so on and so forth. So it's and also if you take the quiz, there's a coupon code quiz for 10% off your order. So, buy that book too. So, yeah.
Ross is all about the buying of books.
And two other bits of news. There's a new RPPR video up, which we'll have a link of to our playthrough of Artemis Spaceship Simulator.
Yes,
we
that's
actually did this in August. Thad is in the video with a fez, and Tom is there with an eye patch. And
that was my costume.
That was your costume.
And it worked.
Yeah, I'm wearing a karate outfit I got from my brother that he wore as a Halloween costume. So, and it's pretty ridiculous. And we're just...
We won,
but we're...
By the grace of... despite... we won in spite of ourselves. Not because of ourselves.
Yeah, pretty much. We're just terrible at it.
I bet the ship crew is like, holy crap, Captain, we succeeded.
Yeah.
The captain was as surprised as we are.
I was a great captain.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean terrible. Just terrible. And finally, in one last bit of news, Cody, former RPPR regular and player, who's also now doing the blog Popgun Chaos, is doing a Kickstarter of his own called No More City, which is a comic book that he wants to do. So check that out. And it's a noir fantasy thing. So it's a little like Powers, I guess. And they've got a good artist for it. The art is a little like Ben Templesmith.
Yeah.
And it looks like it'll be a good, interesting,
worthy
book.
of your money.
Yeah. So, get his stuff too. And cause, he doesn't even want as much as I do. So, check that out. And, and for the this isn't really news. I finally got to play D&D next before. So for our anecdote, I'm going to be talking about my playtest experience with D&D next. So, I won't be spoiling anything, I guess. So anyways.
And I will sit here and pretend that I have something to add.
Well, you can talk about, how rate how it's going versus asking questions about it or whatever. So I don't know. We'll figure it.
It will be a spirited debate, much like the presidential debates.
Yeah, or hopefully more like the vice presidential debates.
Yeah, those were a little.
That was a little more exciting. So anyways, let us get on to the main topic, base rating 101. So the whole idea of base raiders is that you in a world that had superheroes and supervillains, one day all of them, the major ones, disappear, and so leaving behind many secret bases, fortresses of solitude, bat caves, Doctor Doom's castle, those kind of places. I mean, it seems it's a very common trope in the superhero genre, and yet people don't really. So to me, that isn't that a dungeon? With all the traps and the guardians and the
it totally is. But in my opinion, I think those are a lot better dungeons than like some tomb.
Yeah. Certainly, I don't think it's really been done in a superhero game before, this idea. And so I developed a whole idea of how to make that into a role-playing game in of itself. So the whole idea of base raiders is that the bases you need to raid them to keep up your power levels, to gain, because it's about normal people who find ways to give themselves superpowers. They find the super soldier drug and inject themselves with it. They find the book of magic and read it, whatever. And they have to do it
an intense competition.
Yeah, there's a lot of bad guys out there. Now there's an arms race between them, and so for me, a lot of base raiders comes out of my interest in ruins and in I've talked a lot about urban exploration and stuff like that in the past, and it's recently, last couple months, I played through the Fear trilogy, the Fear trilogy of video games. It made me really think that there's this whole genre of ruins exploration in video games, and it's really, really dominant in first-person shooters and horror games where you're going. It's so I was trying to come up with a term for it. And as I explained to Tom, it's not really apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic, because these are about individual places. The best example aside from the Fear games, I think, would be like BioShock. You go to this underwater base and everyone's dead, or they're crazy,
long gone.
Yeah, well, there's enough people for you to fight, but it's not like 95% of the people that are dead, the remaining 5% want to kill you, and they're all crazy mutated people. So, but you go through this ruin of an underground or underwater, colony, base, whatever you want to call it, and you find elements of what the people are left behind. The party decorations from New Year's, the diaries.
Yeah. Actually, a good film version that I just thought of is the Ghost Ship.
Yeah,
it was a ship from the 60s that they go to, and it's now like 30 or 40 years old, but there's still clues like spent shell casings littering the ground.
Yeah,
it's completely recognizable as what it once was.
Right. And you can kind of think of, that's a haunted house genre. Well, yeah, no, because haunted houses are always places that usually that people are, that's the haunted house down the street. This is the Ghost Ship or the BioShock underground place, or like in Dead Space, the spaceship, are all very isolated and cut off from the rest of the world. There's no, cops knocking on the doors to find out what's going on or anything like that. You're the first responder usually. And you're going through these ruins, and you can imagine what happened to these people, but you only see trace elements of it. So there's a whole genre of this ruins exploration. And so I was thinking of, there's the word utopia, which I looked up the etymology for, which is the Greek word for place is topos, and then either good or is spelled it's pronounced U, so it's utopia, either the good place or the no place, which is very clever. Utopia can't exist because humans were kind of fucked anyway. And then there's dystopia, which means dis comes from the Greek word for bad, so it's bad place. So it's kind of like ruins place, and so the ancient Greek word for ruin is aripion. At least that's the what the ancient Greek dictionary tells me the Latin transliteration is. So, Aripiatopia, something like that. I don't know. Maybe there's a linguist that among our listeners that can come up with a better, cooler word for it. But that's where the genesis is. Why don't we have a whole game of going through these ruins?
We'll get Noam Chomsky on this.
Yeah. I'm sure he will be happy to help us.
I'm sure he would.
Not lecture us about politics. So, this whole idea of why don't we make a role-playing game about going through ruins that are not dungeons? A dungeon is very much a fantasy thing, but a modern or science fiction, kind of dungeon or place or ruin would be an interesting place to have a game. And so what better place to put that in the superhero genre, because superhero genre is very forgiving. You can make it horror, you can go back into happy action, or you can make it crazy sci-fi high concept kind of thing. I know some people are going to get pissed, you're using the phrase high concept wrong, so
I won't judge you.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom.
You bet.
But it's sort of like thinking and going back. Let's get back to the roots of what place is, or what dungeons are. What is the role of place, of architecture in role-playing games in general? So, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, obviously, to me, architecture is, at its core, it's a setting, but I think it's kind of a specific kind of setting. Mm-hmm. It's specifically one where everything's going to take place,
right?
In whatever adventure you're running. To me, because obviously you can have whole worlds to explore.
Yeah.
But when you go to a dungeon,
yeah,
you go there pretty much for one purpose,
right?
And that's to go through. That's most likely to go through the big overarching adventure for this session,
right? But it's interesting. Architecture is, of course, an artificial. Mm-hmm. You could talk about the architecture of adventure design, the structuring. So everything you do, even if you're in the middle of the desert in a role-playing game, it's still about architecture, because the game master had to design that desert, that place. He had to imagine it. But if you're talking about a dungeon, the thing that I find interesting is it's an artificial place almost always. It's either
it's a tomb.
It's a tomb. It's even if it's a cavern. There's some sort of artificiality to it. Like there's monsters in it, intelligent monsters or a wizard.
There's infrastructure in it most of the time.
Yeah, there's infrastructure. There's some kind of reason. It's some sort of intelligence is in there, or has altered the place, has reshaped the place. I know there are some dungeons that are totally natural, in the sense like it's a cavern and there are hazards like rock slide, mm-hmm. avalanches and shit like that, but like not very many. There's I can't, pretty much every popular dungeon I can think of is mostly artificial.
There's construction in it.
Yeah, there's construction in it, but it's unlike a city or a normal place. There's no rules. It's still a wild and dangerous place. Like it's still for all intents and purposes, a demilitarized zone. It's this place, this no man's land that you're not supposed to go to. But it's not.
It's one of those enter at your own risk. We take no responsibility.
It's artificial, but an absence of law. An absence of order. It's seldom like, one thing I find interesting, dungeons are seldom like active military fortresses that you have to infiltrate. It's not like Solid Snake, he goes into a base and he just takes out the guards and tries to get to the thing. Dungeons are kind of like, there's always this element of abandonment, don't you think?
The temple, like I said, the temple from the opening of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
He's that going into the idol's temple, that's
a perfect
dungeon.
Yeah, because it's built, but it's been abandoned.
You can tell people used to live here long ago.
Yeah,
and they left behind security systems.
Yeah, that still work, which is amazing. But there's still this. But it's not like it's a bank vault that's actively being guarded. We don't think of banks. There are bank robbers, but we don't think of bank robbers as dungeon crawlers. No, because that's sort of an active, lived-in place that people are actively,
and
using.
there's authorities are within just a phone call away.
Right. So it becomes less of a dungeon. Like that's what I find interesting about the concept of a dungeon crawl, is that there's always this idea of ruin in it. There's this idea of abandonment, of like isolation, of like civilization has departed, or this civilization is gone.
Or in that case, like I kind of like or civilization that isolation has taken back over. Mm-hmm. A place that used to be civilized.
Yeah,
but no longer.
Right, and this sort of I think this is important, because if you like look into the reading of there's this whole history of ruins, in the sense of like, what is the philosophical ideal of a ruin? What are the aesthetics of ruins? And there's this kind of memento mori aspect to them, where like, this is what a civilization was. Perhaps one day our civilization will be like this. Perhaps our own house will be like this. So the people going through the dungeon or the ruins always try to connect it to themselves.
Yeah, like I think a good example, like Pripyat, Ukraine.
Yeah.
which is right near Chernobyl.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a perfect modern ruin. That's like because every time you talk about that, every time I hear about it,
it's like frozen in like 1985.
that's exactly it. That's like how people describe it. It's not even the they mention Chernobyl, but they say it's a time capsule. It's frozen in time. People couldn't take anything. The calendars are still on the walls. That's how they describe it. That's the first thing that comes to mind when people describe that, and it's very consistent. And so like that's the most important aspect of it to it. Not that nothing about the architecture of the houses, nothing about the people. It's that it was frozen. It was left. It was abandoned suddenly.
A more obscure version. I don't know if you ever watched Ghostbusters 2.
Yeah,
the Van Horn the pneumatic transit system. Yeah, like the very first underground subway.
Yeah.
It was basically frozen in like turn of the century America.
Now, is that real or is that made up for the movie? Do you know?
The actual the actual pneumatic transit system I think was made up, but there are like the original subway lines buried beneath the current ones.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are still there. Some of those stations from like the early 1900s are still there.
Yeah.
Just completely abandoned.
Yeah. So, I mean, the question is, why is this important? Like, why is this sense that it has to be abandoned important for a dungeon? Like, why is that, the place that has been abandoned a dungeon and the place that has people living in it not a dungeon? I mean, usually that's the case. I mean, usually there are people in dungeons, but they're always like,
they're not residents.
Well, they're residents.
They're not the original residents.
They're not the original residents. Perfect. Yeah, that's exactly it. They're squatters. They're goblin opportunists.
Like a goblin tribe's moved in here just because it's there.
Right. Or a cultist comes back because he wants to research the original work of the wizard who built that tower or whatever. There are some exceptions. Like if it's a tomb. And it's just an undead wizard, a lich inside, it's just, but then there's that kind of like that bubble, that, like a time capsule element to it. So
or in a lot of cases,
in this case, the time capsule has a fucking angry wizard in it.
Yeah. Or it's like, or something has moved in there and is repurposing it for its own use.
Yeah.
That's the case of like, say, like, one of those, like spiders, like giant monster spiders have taken over a place.
Oh yeah.
It's the same place except now it's webbed all over. But there's places you can remove web and see something that used to be part of this civilization or whatever it was.
Yeah. So there's sort of so it's very important in there. And you can talk a lot about. There are books written about this subject, and I one of them I've been reading about the necessity of ruins. I think I mentioned it before on the podcast, but it talks about the aesthetics of this, and it's a very complex topic, so I'm not gonna go into, and I'm still absorbing it, trying to figure it out myself. But it's a very common thing, and what's interesting is. Video games all have this. They all have that. Like in the video games, are always going in abandoned places. First-person shooters. I think partly because of technical reasons. Like if you went into you can't simulate thousands of people in a city block, in a video game quite yet because of technical reasons. So it's better to say, oh, this was a busy hospital, but then monsters showed up and killed everybody.
Actually, Fallout 3 in Washington D.C. I think it's important because in that one it's like that, and you can also recognize things.
Yeah,
I think that's important.
I think it is too, because I think it's about the how this place makes you feel, the person playing the game or the person as a role player. Like oh my god, this could be a city that if it's some alien tomb that you have no understanding of, then it doesn't.
Yeah,
like you were talking about that earlier, like before the show, like how dungeons don't mean as much to you as like
dungeons don't mean as much as like. Actual like fairly recent ruins. I mean, Fallout 3 is a really good example because, like you've played that obviously, and you've gone into the Capitol building. Mm-hmm. The thing is, like I've been in the Capitol building. I've seen the rotunda, and the rotunda's in the game,
right?
And it's a lot more. It's a lot more. It affects me more when it's like a place I recognize,
right?
As now it's just decrepit and and abandoned for many years,
right?
I think that's more effective than, like the catacombs of Paris or something.
Right.
That I have no connection to. I mean, yes, I would love to see them. I'm sure they're very interesting to see. Mm. But in the case of affecting me, it's not going to be as much as something that, as you said, like the familiar made unfamiliar.
Right.
I think that's far more effective, which is why I think more ruins that are like 100 years old or more, I think, are a lot more effective than ancient ruins.
Right. I mean, there's certainly, and well, even ancient ruins. I think it depends. There, if it can make you relate, if you can
recognize,
I think
what
Pompeii would be, because you can see the people literally. They're
exactly where they dropped,
and the graffiti that's been left behind. That like if you read the translation, on the websites there are translations of all the graffiti on the walls of Pompeii, and it's like the graffiti you read today. I slept with the waitress here, ha 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 ha.
Yeah. Machu Picchu, I think, would be another good example.
Yeah,
because it's largely intact.
Yeah,
just obviously long abandoned.
So you have to. So I think getting it back to role playing games. I think if you're going to design a base, a ruin, a dungeon, if you want to make it effective to the players, there has to be. It's not always about the trap design, the monster design, and making it. It's about how it relates to the players and how to get that sort of emotional resonance to them. Because if you go into the Capitol building and you describe how this was once the seat of government, and you can see everything and only covered in dust and there's ruins and fragments everywhere, I think players would be a lot more effective than if you created some, baller, crazy alien dungeon that was just, made by a wizard with force walls and walls of fire and stuff like that.
Or like the second Planet of the Apes movie.
Yeah.
Where it's New York City is now like an underground cavern.
Right.
It works a lot better because you can clearly see things.
Right. So I think that's sort of an important thing. So for base ratings, if you're doing a superhero base, if you're doing a supervillain base, like how do you do that? How do you make that come across? I mean,
well, I think obviously the thing with I think with supervillains, you can get a little crazy and still go with it because these are wizards, these are super scientist villains,
right?
But if also with stuff you recognize, like I think a table, like if you see a table with like ancient discarded embalming tools covered in dust, it's not going to hit you as much as say a typewriter on the desk covered in dust, and next to it is like one of the old rotary phones from the 50s.
Yeah,
I think that's going to be a lot more effective.
Yeah, something incongruous. I think
that you can tell that. I think something that confers to you. You're the first person to stumble upon this place in a long time.
I think that's important too. Like you're the first to trespass, the first to see it.
Or you don't have to be. I mean, you can even use it if you're not the first. If you see all this stuff from the 50s, and then over to the side there's a modern gun, not quite as covered in dust.
Yeah.
Well, like, oh crap, were we the first?
Yeah.
And what happened?
Yeah, I mean that can work too. I think for superhero and supervillain bases, one important thing is that right is the idea that this, as crazy as it could be, and we're talking about the superhero genre, this could be a tesseract inside a pocket dimension with all kind non-Euclidean geometry and alien and randomly changing gravity and all kinds of crazy shit, but it's still at some point the reason the superheroes and villains built these places because they needed it because they couldn't exactly use the existing infrastructure of the civilization. If they needed a storage shed, they couldn't just fucking rent a storage shed. Like, can I store my extra plutonium in this place? Like they needed to build everything.
Could I possibly get one of the temperature controlled ones, or do you have any more of those left?
Yeah, if a velociraptor that's been if you went back in time and got bitten by a velociraptor and you have to come back and you can't exactly get that treated at a hospital because they're going to ask a lot of awkward questions, and you're like, oh shit, they're like Komodo dragons, they're poisonous, or they gave me a disease. So you have to build your own hospital, you have to build your own medic base. So and then again, the most important thing is that you have to build a sort of a shelter, a home, or at least some place where you can rest and recover. Yeah. So I think
it's also important that these places know that these places had a purpose.
Yeah.
I've seen there's some adventures where there are these grand underground tombs that seem to have no purpose.
Yeah.
Or like they build this huge underground tomb with traps and mystical wards, and all it is like a burial chamber for one guy.
Right.
Where clearly this took hundreds of years to do. Why would you do it for this one guy?
Yeah.
Like, well, we just wanted a really elaborate dungeon. Like,
yeah.
Well, gee, thanks.
Yeah. I mean, unless that guy was a demigod and built it himself because he was fucking crazy, then,
But most of the time it's not.
Yeah.
Which is why I think, it's when you recognize, like, oh, this is where he slept. This is... this was his bath. He had a bathroom.
Yeah.
There was a toilet and a shower.
Yeah. So I think So that's one idea whenever you're designing. And then, the purpose, that sort of informs what's going to be there. Like, some of these superhero bases are going to be, like the Fortress of Solitude, massive dungeons, basically, with multiple levels, with here's the prison, here's the armor, here's the lab. But other could be, much more simple. They could be like a single room, like a safe house. Like, here's my hidden apartment that I hid with alien technology, but it's in the city, and, blah, blah, blah. It's just a place where I could, rest after getting the crap beat out of me,
because I'm not exactly an alien from Krypton,
right? Yeah, I just stole.
I'm on a
alien.
budget.
Yeah, I'm on a budget. Nice. So you have to think about its purpose. So I think the thing is, architecture. We usually think of the how you can use these places. You can use them obviously as an enemy, where it's this challenge with the traps and the layout and the hazards. Mm-hmm. But it could also be a MacGuffin itself. It could just be like the place itself isn't that dangerous to be in. It's just there's something important about it. Like, it holds something important, or there's some sort of mechanism inside the base, like it has the control room to the nuclear reactor or whatever. So the place itself could just be a MacGuffin, like it could be the place you don't spend time in there. It's getting to there, or
finding it,
or making sure other people don't find it. Controlling access to it. So some of these bases don't even have to be dungeons,
and some of these bases could be characters in and of themselves too.
Yeah,
depending on what's there. Like, if there's a controlling force behind it,
right? Yeah, definitely. Again, a very common thing in the superhero genre is the sort of inanimate forces.
Whether it's
genius loci, the idea.
Whether it's an AI, whether it's a spirit.
The X-Men, we have the Danger Room eventually became a robot Danger that was a sentient Danger Room, basically. So you can have that kind of thing as well. So again, I think we were talking about ruins, and one thing I wanted to mention that you're certainly talking about the aesthetics is there's this whole idea of the ruin value, which actually goes to a topic of interest for you, Albert Speer. So I don't know when I bring up ruin value, what comes to mind? Or Albert Speer?
Well, Albert Speer was Hitler's chief architect, and later became chief of his armaments division in the later part of the war. And he was also the one that's supposed to be designing the new Germanian Empire, from the new capital city, which he on several occasions told Hitler was completely unworkable.
Right.
But also he was also the one that made sure Germany didn't institute scorched earth policy, which he prevented that. But he also designed. I believe he was one of the designers of the Führer bunker.
Right.
So,
but what's interesting is he had this idea of ruin value, which was something he and Hitler both agreed on. They had this romantic view of reality, which was sort of informed a lot of the political decisions later on, not pragmatism or realism. But the basic idea behind ruin value is the idea is that a building's value should not just be judged in how it is when it's built and used, but how it would be in 1,000 years. What would basically you build a building to make sure that when it collapses or when it falls apart or whatever, it's a beautiful ruin. Like, because they loved the Colosseum, they loved ancient Roman,
the Parthenon.
Yeah, the Parthenon, all these ancient ruins, and they wanted to make sure that their buildings would eventually they'd ruin beautifully, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that was the idea. It's like, in 1,000 years, Berlin should look so beautiful with all these nice ruins covered in ivy, and it's crazy, but I can see a lot of people here and today like, oh yeah, man, that's a good idea. Like, we should build our buildings like that. Like, I mean, I don't know about you.
Yeah. Yeah, I just don't see it. Like, I don't see that happening with like the Burj Khalifa or something.
Yeah.
Like modern office buildings, I don't think are.
No, they're definitely built to be as cheap and as efficient as possible. And I really don't see any ruin value in, say, a big box store. A fucking local Walmart is going to be pretty ugly if it lasts 10 years.
I can't think of much. I can't think of much in America. Like the Capitol building, maybe.
Yeah,
because columns just seem to be really good for ruins. So for some reason, just columns are.
I don't know. I think a lot of 19th century architecture would be like even the downtown library, which was that built by Carnegie or is that one of the Rockefellers? Do you remember?
I think it was one of the Rockefellers.
Yeah, one of the Rockefellers. They built all those old school robber barons, built a shitload of libraries and buildings out. Oh, even the town hall, city hall here. There's a lot of those older Victorian buildings.
Or a lot of the the mansions built by the super rich of the Gilded Age.
Yeah,
like the Breakers.
We can see it. Actually, we can see it right now. I mean, isn't that what urban exploration is all about? Like, you see all these photos of people going into abandoned insane asylums that were abandoned in the 80s or 70s, and they look beautiful now. The paint peeling off, the remnants, the rusted wheelchairs and shit, and in the hallways,
ancient antiseptic.
Yeah, exactly. And it's rather beautiful. So those buildings, which were also built Victorian era, for the most part, were pretty beautiful when they were ruined. But these, buildings today, big mansions and suburbs and kind of, I don't see that. I don't see them lasting very long.
No, I don't either. Buckingham Palace, I think, would make a good ruin.
Oh, yeah.
Something like that. Tower of London.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. If they ever let it fall into ruination.
Well, that's true. London Bridge might be kind of interesting as a ruin.
But actually, I think there would be some other things because, you're speaking about spear and ruins. Some of these ruins aren't just for aesthetic value, or aren't, some of these buildings aren't built for ruin value, but for long-term use. And Spear built the Fuhrer bunker, but I know you were mentioning before the show that you're very interested in using bunkers in sort of Cold War architecture as
because I like them. They're designed specifically to survive long term.
Right. They're sort of the opposite.
Yes, these things
no
are
ruin value.
Yeah, these things are designed to stay intact even after direct impact of a nuclear weapon.
Right.
And also made of stuff that doesn't crumble easily. So they're not designed for beauty. I think what I like about bunkers is they're pure utilitarian function. Mm-hmm. Everything in them, is once again like the vaults from Fallout.
Yeah,
they are basically they are pragmatism to the extreme.
Yeah,
nothing here. There's no aesthetic here. This is for survival and for you,
very much an engineering
and to live and to last for centuries. So.
Right.
I think that's what I like about bunkers is they can actually stay intact far better than a castle.
If they're well built.
Yeah.
I know there's some Cold War era bunkers that aren't doing so well. Some of those dictators and some of the Soviet satellite countries, they all had bunkers. And
but a lot of them weren't built very well.
Well, that's what I mean. NORAD's obviously. I mean, even NORAD, I think. They're because their budgets, it's basically
there is no more Cold War.
Yeah, so they haven't shut it down, but they aren't doing much for it. They've obviously cut back the personnel and everything there. I don't know. Have you heard much about that?
Yeah, and also, or the ones they actually there were several bunkers. I forget the names of the locations, which were actually designed to be the new capital in the event of a nuclear war. Yeah, so they're actually designed. They have offices that are designed to look exactly like the Oval Office.
Oh yeah, I mean you can see that, and that, again, going back to video games, that you can see that in Fallout 2, we have the oil rig where there's an
Oval
Office in there, so the president in waiting can make speeches to his people, and it's very crazy, but
it's designed for morale for the citizens because. They want to see their president broadcasting from the White House, no matter even if Washington's been scorched with nukes.
Yeah. So out of these other concerns, you have these buildings built totally opposite to what Spear was doing. Is the idea of
that these are designed to not be ruins.
Yeah, not be ruins, never to survive as long as possible. But that also comes up with its own sort of unique aesthetic, it becomes an aesthetic of itself. People like the whole Fallout video game series is about that, and they sort of, I wouldn't say they fetishized it, but they certainly took that bunker design idea and fucking ran with it, wouldn't you say? Because there's so many different vaults, and each one of them is crazy. But I also like how there are all these missile silos that have been abandoned now.
A lot of people buy them as houses now.
Exactly, they buy them and convert them into houses, and I love that.
And that would be freaking awesome.
Yeah,
I think.
But that's sort of the triumph. And no matter how this is only utilitarian, and this is the only form people put their own aesthetic. They like it. So going back to basing, or base raiders, the idea is so you can really justify just about any sort of combination of things. So you could take, people repurpose old buildings, old places, frequently. We have the goblins that repurpose the old wizard's tower, and then we have people repurposing missile silos into houses.
Or the xenomorphs repurposing the colony.
Yeah, exactly.
And aliens.
Yeah, I'm talking about those, ruins, but there are movie examples of that as well. So, Aliens is a perfect example of that. That's very structured, much like I think a lot of first-person video games are structured after Aliens, certainly Half-Life.
Because the Hadley's Hope colony in Aliens, I loved it because it's not ruined, but because it was like
it's ruined.
Well, it's ruined, but it was like
abandoned.
But it was abandoned weeks ago rather than years.
Right.
And I love that. There's just little things like there's one scene I remember. It's a tiny little quick scene. Just they're going to this office. And there's a coffee cup and a donut still on a desk, except it's now damp because water's been dripping on it.
Right.
But there's a donut with a bite out of it and a coffee cup.
Right, and that's and that's exactly the same kind of idea that gets us excited about Chernobyl and Pompeii and this the graffiti on the wall, the calendars left on the wall, or the donut. That's a great observation. And so you have to think with the if you're doing a base, so you come up with a superhero who has a cloning lab or whatever, have the report, have a screensaver on, his computer's still on, he's still logged into Facebook,
and guys going Gary.
Yeah, exactly. So even though it's been 7 months, and these are bring this all up is just get you guys thinking about how to use place, how to rethink the dungeon, thinking about what its role is in the game, and because I think a lot of people don't like dungeon crawling because it gets into
It's formulaic.
It's this idea of simulating dungeon crawling. It's kind of born out of old school Dungeons and Dragons, where you map everything on grid paper and by 10-foot squares
and reveal it slowly as you go.
And you have to figure out the traps, and the traps are always bastards. The Tomb of Horrors kind of thing. Like you stick your arm in there, you die. So. It's, what do you do? How do you do this? And I think the thing is, you have to think more about the emotional importance of the place, how to get the players to think this is an interesting place, and then how to make an adventure around it. And Indiana Jones and Aliens are great examples of that. The Indiana Jones is I have to get the thing inside the dangerous place. I have to find the dangerous place first, and then I have to risk my life to get the thing that's inside the dangerous place. Then I have to get back out of the dangerous place.
Without being seen by the bad guys.
Yeah. But in Aliens, it's like a mystery at first. It's like
it's a rescue mission that you find out there's no one to rescue.
Right. So it's a mystery. Like, what happened to those people? What's going on? And the whole mystery.
I think Aliens, it's landing on that colony would be no different than boarding the Mary Celeste for the first time.
Yeah.
Really, just because you don't have a fucking clue what happened, and it could be really, really bad.
Yeah, but you don't know. So, so the thing is, how do you make an interesting base? How do you make something that's going to be great for players that aren't into dungeon? I mean, you can certainly do that hardcore dungeon crawling thing where everyone's grid paper and stuff like that. And I know there are people that love that, but.
I'm not one of them.
Right. So how would you do? How would you design a base?
Me personally, going entirely on my side. First of all, I'd make it less than 100 years old or less.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, certainly that would come into play since it's superhero genre.
Yeah. So I mean, it's got to be. First of all, it has to be. First thing, I would have to know exactly what this place was, and what it was used for. I mean, I need to know, was this guy's just private lab that he hid, or did he actually live here? Did he have staff here?
Yeah,
because I mean, if he had staff here, then you have to take that into account and throw in and here's some bunk rooms, or there's military bunk beds.
So how much so that's interesting. So you're actually mapping everything out,
well, I think what would be there, actually Divine Fire, when I designed the base, I was taking all that into account. Okay, it's a Nazi research facility, so there's going to be civilian workers, scientists, there's going to be military people, so I have to have some barracks here. I have to have some barracks and some living quarters. So actually, if you have staff, you have to have everything people need to live,
right?
Which includes food, dining, hygiene facilities, all that. You have to make sure all that's in there,
right?
Then, of course, then you think, okay, well, this is military, so there also has to be armories, watchtowers,
motor pool.
And, of course, it's also a science lab. So
Right.
then the science lab, that's, okay, so what kind of science was it?
Right.
What were things like...
If it's generators.
Yeah, regenerators. If it's a reactor, you would need a containment room.
Yeah.
Essentially, first thing I would do is know exactly what this place was for, everything they would need. I would design it from there. And once you have the base, I think I call that just like the framework. Then you can start kind of, putting in your own embellishments. Like I said, the donut with a bite left out of it.
Right.
Just the things that make the adventure an adventure.
Well, go back to mapping. So you like figured out where all the buildings were, but you didn't go into the detail of like how the room layouts were for each building or anything like that?
I didn't. I had it in my head, but I didn't write it down because I didn't feel I needed to. I feel most people, when you mention it's a barracks, there are bunk beds lined up, they can probably visualize that in their heads. I only really mapped out the reactor chamber.
Okay.
Because that was entirely my creation, and I think it needed a much.
I think that's a good rule of thumb. I mean, if it's a type of building that people would be familiar with, then
everyone knows what a bathroom looks like.
Right.
Everyone knows what a barracks looks like.
But if you're doing something unusual, like the bathroom of an alien, for example, that's 70 feet tall, then like that's a fucking football sized room.
Which is another thing. UFOs, they never address that.
Yeah.
When you go aboard alien ships in any game or RPG I've been in, they never address that. And I think that's wrong. I think I want to see alien bathrooms when I board some alien ship.
Well, they have airlocks. They can just space it. So
yeah, but what if they can't?
Well, that's a question for the ages.
Well, okay. Well, if it's not a spaceship, what if it's an alien base?
Well, that's true. That's true. No arguments here. It is.
But yeah, anyway.
So
I only describe the stuff that I think really needs to be described.
Well, and you only map. So I mean, that's the thing about dungeons. I think that a lot of people don't like designing dungeons, or some game masters don't like designing dungeons because of all the mapping that you have to do. And that's certainly a problem for some people. Like, because if you're not very good at drawing and you have a lot to do, it's kind of a pain.
Well, especially people that have computer programs that make maps of dungeons. Yeah. I noticed a lot of they love to use them.
Yeah, there's some people that love mapping, and
I don't.
So think about I think that kind of that way of just doing it light, only focusing on the weird stuff, the the non-typical stuff.
And if they want to explore the mundane stuff, that's fine too. If they want to look around, the thing is, like, if they're looking around a place like that, what they could find. Right. Like, well, okay, there's footlockers. You would find uniforms and maybe some personal effects of whoever lived here. I think that kind of stuff. Logic and common sense could really get you through a lot of that.
So for you, you start from the top, and work your way down, basically.
Yeah, I'm a top-down person.
All right, so you come up with the idea, then you work on the general idea.
Well, for the idea, what this place was,
right? And
then, once I know what it was, what would they need to fulfill this?
So how far do you go out from the initial base? I know we talk. One thing we talked about before we recorded the episode was talking about the idea of these bases, these dungeons. They're different in one respect in that. How do they interact with the environment around them? Some of them don't.
Obviously, now Divine Fire couldn't because it's way up in the mountains, away from everyone.
Well, let's explore that.
At the time.
Right.
I think now, if the base in Divine Fire during World War II could not have anyone nearby because it was a Nazi military installation with the Nazis still in power.
Right.
But if I was, say, to run this 20 years later,
right,
I could actually see there could be a small town at the base of the mountain where it was at.
Well, let's explore that. I mean, because again, we basically the way
I thought about that, but
right.
the sequel, I then decided to go for the Soviet Union.
Okay, fair enough.
But I've planned through some of that.
Okay, that's good. But the way I see it, there's generally two ways of base. Base could either be a bubble, or a time capsule. Basically, it's totally out of sync with everything around it. Like the Tomb of Horrors is a good example. The Tomb of Horrors just sits in the mountain, and if you don't go in the Tomb of Horrors, it doesn't matter. Nothing leaks out. Anything that goes in doesn't come out. So it's just this little place out of time. But then you have the other case where this dungeon interacts with the rest of the environment,
to varying degrees.
The goblins in the abandoned old wizard's tower go out and raid the villages, so that's why the villagers are hiring adventurers to go after to explore this wizard's tower to get rid of the goblins. Or there's something actually the thing I think it was in Divine Fire is something could be leaking out, and just because there's not people nearby doesn't mean it doesn't interact.
The radiation
could mutate mutate wildlife. You could see, or it could be minor, like you just see, the trees have fallen down, they've withered. Maybe winter, but like that's not normal, or it could be really bad, like mutated wolves are literally at the fences, just wait, you see eyes out in the darkness, and they're fucking.
Yeah, and there's 4 of them for each one.
Yeah. So, yeah, exactly. So there could be some interaction with it's not necessarily the conscious, like what the intelligent inhabitants do to the other intelligent inhabitants do, whether they trade, whether they fight, whether they steal or whatever. It could be leakage, pollution, infection, whatever you want to call it, or it could be beneficial, perhaps. So it doesn't always necessarily have to be negative. Like, for example, the goblins in the wizards' towers keep out the kobold tribe, who would burn all the crops and kill everybody. For example, if they keep out the wolves. They tame the wolf, or they tame the wolves so the wolves don't eat the livestock or whatever. So there are beneficial.
Or the ghouls living below the cemetery.
Yeah, the ghouls below living in the cemetery eat all the dead bodies, so there's no plague going around. Like, there's not as much infection. The water supply isn't infected because you throw the body in the water. Well, you don't drink from the well. But that's what so you think about the ramifications of how this dungeon interacts with the place it is in. So anyways, so that's I think what I usually typically do too is the top down, work from your concept. But why don't we, just as a thought experiment, try to work it from the way up, from sort of take it the opposite. Like, think of a place and then start working our way up to what the concept is be. So, like, why don't we take, like, say, the missile silo, like we were talking about earlier. So what would be interesting about this missile silo? It's a bit like, what could we put in there at first? So,
all right, just
for base raiders. So a superhero, a supervillain thing. Let's say it's an abandoned missile silo that the U.S. Army sold off to a rich guy. So that would be the first detail. And then he turned it into a home, obviously. So it's a missile silo turned, luxury house. So what's the real reason he would be in there, though? So, or what would be an interesting ramification or something like that?
Like, the place wasn't actually a missile silo. Okay. But was actually like a satellite, like a place for launching things into orbit.
Okay, so all right.
So the missiles were actually orbital rockets.
Okay, so all right, so it's an orbital rocket facility
that they said was a missile silo.
All right, so let's say the rich guy knew about that, or although he let on that he wasn't, and so he starts using that to launch other things into orbit. Actually, no, he couldn't, because they would still know about it, because you're launching into fucking orbit. It's like the radar would pick that up. He needed this space. So what's interesting about that place? It's got a lot of space. It's got a lot of vertical space underground. So you can do if you need a lot of space underground that nobody would see, that would be the perfect place to do it, wouldn't it? Yeah. So what would you do in that kind of place? You could do. For one thing, let's say to go against type, he's not a high tech, he's not a super scientist, he's a wizard or an occultist. So let's say he used the place to conduct his research into dimensional portals. Like, he was opening portals and he needed a lot of space to open up a portal into the netherworld. So what's next? What did he find there? Why? Yeah. So let's say we'll think of a crazy random magical dimension.
Like the Far Realm.
The Far Realm? Oh, like from 4th Ed or 3rd Ed D&D? All right, yeah. The basic standard thing. So he opens it up. Nasty Cthulhu-esque entities start pouring out. Does he get out in time, or does he get infected? Does he shut it down? Because, I mean, that would be the place to do it, because even if it's an orbital rocket facility, it's still being, steel doors, vault doors, and that kind of thing. So,
and launch and silo covers. I've seen silo covers.
Yeah. So it's a pretty strong reinforced place, so they aren't getting out. So does he shut it down in time or not?
He locks them in.
Okay. And then, so it's a base, but he doesn't know what to do with it, so he basically locks it up. He installs magical guardians to make sure nothing happens
so he can go to try to find a way to close it.
And then he disappears. That's where it's at. So let's add one more complication. Let's say someone else stumbles across it and thinks it's a missile silo. So the person who thinks it's a missile silo, why would he want to be there? Is he an urban explorer or wait, no, he thinks it's a missile silo that's turned into a house because that's the public story, right? So who is this other person? Is he someone trying to just get photos of it, or is he a saboteur? Or?
Actually, I heard a story like this. These people bought a missile silo.
Yeah,
because they were like I don't want to say pagans, but kind of like Wiccans.
Yeah,
and they wanted to cleanse what they thought was negative karma of a place of war that used to house weapons of mass destruction. So they're going there essentially to cleanse its karma.
Okay, I like that.
So like they're not. I mean, they're mystics, but they're not actual wizards.
Okay.
So like they've read all kinds of mystical stuff. But they don't actually wield magic.
Okay. All right, so they go there. They had the best intentions in mind, but the original guy, the wizard, left behind guardians. The guardians, but he's a good guy, we'll say. So the guardians capture these people, but they kill them, and they don't know what to do with them because they're waiting for their boss to come back, and his boss isn't coming back. So they put them in. So they imprison them basically
for their own safety.
For their own safety, and the people, of course, are just pissed, and they're just like, ah. So one of them escapes and runs the vault and gets infected. So the doors open, they start pouring out, and so the place starts getting infected. Or so it could be, I could see three different ways. One, the bad guys won out, and they've totally infected the place. So when the players go in, it's just this.
It's basically an alien dimension on Earth at this point,
right? But there's still remnants of the wizard, of the orbital rocket facility, and the trace elements of what the karma people were doing. So like flower power, not nuclear power, that kind of shit. Or two, the good guys totally won. The Guardians just close the door behind them, and they're still holding guard, but now they're getting paranoid. Maybe they're starting to go out and look for the guy. Like there's a couple of these, golems or magical guards,
sentient golems.
Yeah, sentient golems, and one of them's wandering around the world trying to find the boss to figure out what the fuck to do, and the other guys are holding down the fort. And so things are getting paranoid, and
I could start an adventure. Actually, just a golem walking into the middle of a large city.
Yeah.
Just trying to find help, not knowing why people are freaking out when it's walking.
Yeah, exactly. The Guardians, they're not exactly subtle about this. And by this point, he's wandered like 500 miles, and nobody's, the players.
It's in the Midwest, and he's wandered to like Kansas City or some big city.
And he has to keep the place secret because that's his whole job is to keep that place safe. So winning over his trust, protecting him. Yeah, so that could be a whole adventure, and then leads back to that. Or a third one, which I also find interesting, is like the guy the activist gets infected, but the Guardians notice about it, and then they start fighting, and they're just evenly matched. So when the players get there, they detect traces of this ongoing siege. The guys trying to push in and establish a beachhead, and the golems fighting them back. So it's a back and forth. So the players come in there, and then of course the Cthulhu thinks, "Help us!" and the golems are like, "Help us!" and the players have to figure out and then the active's like, "Oh my god, rescue us!" So you have several.
Or the activist starts reading some of the stuff the wizard left behind.
Yeah, the wizard left behind his book of magic, and they didn't even and the golems don't even know about that.
Well, he didn't leave any instructions for it.
Exactly. So they're focused on keeping the dimension of, And
so, like, the other activist is now reading actual magic books now.
Yeah, and he's not a good learner, So you have multiple interpretations of what could be happening. So you have an entire adventure for base raiders through this. Multiple ways that this could go. So, and the place itself is interesting, but it's not going to be like a massive sprawling dungeon. It's not going to take up. It's not 10 levels of traps and golems and
Yeah. I think what I really like about kind of like more superhero-ish dungeons is, unlike most dungeons in fantasy, you can kind of repurpose them yourself later.
Yeah, that's true.
Really, when you complete like the Temple of Elemental Evil, you're not likely going to then use it as a base.
I mean, that's true. Or by the time you finish it and you totally clear out all the bad guys, you're already so high level it doesn't really matter.
But stuff like this, you could actually then start to repurpose them.
Yeah, that's true. Like, you clear out the bad guy, you clear out the dimensional monsters, you kill or befriend all the golems, and then hey, you've got a missile silo base that's hidden by magical wards and shit like that.
And also now golem and a group of golems that are actually happy to have a boss again.
Right, exactly, yeah. So if you or you can rebuild the golems with the remnants that you destroyed. So.
Or you're now bosom buddies with the Far Realm, if that's what you wanted.
Or the activists. Maybe the activists have a lot of friends. Who knows? There's a lot of different ways.
And a new wizard circle is formed.
Yeah, exactly. So
that now...
I want to run this.
It's like they're actually... they're beginners, so they mean very well, but they just need guidance.
Yeah.
Because...
they're
like, I might have opened a teeny tiny little portal to hell. I didn't mean to. I zigged when I should have zagged.
And it's really small.
I mean, it's like no bigger than a trash can.
Yeah.
But imps are coming through it like at a dozen a minute.
Yeah.
I mean, we're fighting them back, but they just keep coming. And
yeah.
Like, could you help? Like, I had plans this Saturday. Fine, let's go.
Yeah,
like we have to get these guys supervision.
Exactly. So just as a thought experiment, just off the top of our heads, we come up with a real interesting base array that could be really it'd be an entire mini campaign of just dealing with this one place. Holy shit! What do we do with it? How do we turn a bad situation to a good situation? So because I think a lot of mistake. One thing I always find annoying is in D&D games is like, oh, we went to this dungeon, we leveled up, and we killed the dragon, blah blah blah. And then we go to another dungeon on the other side of the world. You just keep hitting these places, and after you kill everything in the dungeon, it's kind of it's done. And
they're not going to stay empty forever.
Yeah. I mean, a dungeon should be an interesting place. It should be worth revisiting. It should be like the centerpiece of a game. Like this missile silo, it'll be really important. It'll either be where the apocalypse begins, or where you have your new super base at the end of the adventure,
or where your new
friends
new beginner wizard friends are.
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be
that'd be like an investment. They're not powerful or influential now.
Yeah, exactly.
But give them some time. Work with them.
Yeah. So it's something that you read, like Batman. Keeps going back to the Batcave. He doesn't just like, oh, I'm done with the Batcave, and now I'm going somewhere else.
No, and he keeps upgrading it.
Yeah, and even when occasionally people come in and attack him, he still sticks with it.
Well, it's like XCOM. Aliens will eventually invade your base.
Not the new one. But
I'm talking about the old
classic
one, which I love. Seriously, I don't even need to mention that in a shout out. That is just.
Well, yeah, I love the original too. So I mean, it's just awesome.
I haven't played the new one.
Yeah, neither have I. I'm waiting for the price.
I've heard that they say if you thought the original was hard.
Yeah, I've heard that too. But yeah, so I think this gives you an idea of what this game is about, what Base Raider is about, and what the potential of this.
Bases, it's not just the adventure you go to today. It should be something you keep going back to.
Yeah.
Again.
Well, occasionally it'll be a one-time thing because there's always going to be the base where you have to blow it up at the end word. Because
but then at that point, unlike clearing out a dungeon in D&D, blowing up the place because it needed to, that means it is actually over.
Yeah.
No one's going to be coming back to this place because it's been blown to shit.
Yeah. Unless it wasn't so blown up that there's still ruins left behind, then it's ruins. And then it's a whole new base, so it never ends. So I think that's the thing.
It's layers upon layers.
Layers upon layers, another RPPR catchphrase. So next up we'll have a letter from Tom.
Yep.
And then we'll have some shout-outs. And then anecdote. I will talk about my experiences with D&D next, and Tom can comment on that.
It will be so amazing.
It will be.
Stand by. This one goes out to the ones I love. No, that's not just an REM song. This one is an ode to those in RPGs that I love so dearly. I'm referring to the monsters, the horrible creatures that stalk the dark dungeons or abandoned labs and have only our death and dismemberment in mind. Yes, I know that any regular listener will know the unhealthy love affair I have with the creatures that stalk most games. If you don't, you haven't been paying attention. I mean, can you imagine what games would be like without monsters? You would be stuck fighting bandits and thieves for your XP. Think about it. Your badass party of warriors and wizards would be nothing more than cops. Yes, you would be slightly more violent versions of cops. You would be in taverns trading your bandit stories about the bandits you killed, while other adventurer cops would tell you their bandit stories and about the bandits they killed. legends would be woefully uninteresting. And if there was an adventurer boasting about killing bandits and another boasting about slaying a dragon, which one do you think will be getting laid by the bar wench? I'll give you a hint. She will be screaming out loud about riding the little dragon slayer. So with Halloween coming up, I think this is a great time to give thanks to the monsters that allow your players to become the well-laid heroes they are. The next time you are plunging a spear into the giant eyeball of a beholder, take a moment to give a quick thank you for being such a cool monster, preferably before you are petrified. When you find yourself about to drop a flame strike spell on a lich, throw in a nice compliment into those verbal components. And when your Vorpal sword is about to lop off the head of a dragon, go ahead and plant a big wet kiss on that dragon's lips as his head is removed, just to let him know that he is loved. And hell, even if you are killed, that can be cool too. When you are looking at Pelor in the afterlife, do you want to tell him that a bandit backstabbed you, or that a big fucking Tarrasque smashed you into a fine red paste with a 200-year-old tree as you screamed in defiance? Trust me, you will get some serious afterlife tale that way.
And we're back.
We are.
So, for our shout-outs, Tom, you had the first one.
First, I'd like to say it's a shout-out to the American Royal, the barbecue competition in Kansas City, which I didn't enter myself, but I was part of a team this year.
Right.
And I will say we did okay. We came in 19th out of like 545 for sausage.
It's pretty good.
One of the topics, and it's one of those places that, you know, the temp, like, we had a cold snap around that weekend. It dropped to like 48 degrees. If there's any place you would want to be when it's really cold, is a barbecue competition, because there was flames everywhere. Sure, there was like flame was all over. It was like a very delicious, very controlled hell. Just like everyone had perfectly controlled fire everywhere. But
right.
I mean, but of course, you know, the smells alone, you know, when you're getting like over nearly 600 of the best barbecuers in the country.
Were some people coming from out of the country, or is it?
There might have been some international people coming in, but most of them were from
probably Canadian. So that doesn't even count as international.
It doesn't.
It's just America light.
But yeah, and
all the Canadian listeners are sending the anger emails.
I'll say I ate some amazing meat that weekend, and it was really fun to help out because. I mean, I'm not a cook, but I'm really good at manual labor and cleaning up after we're all done. But he said the person whose team we went with said cleanup that normally took 4.5 hours took 2.
That's
when we were there.
That's good.
I mean, you went to it last year for one day.
Yeah, we were kind of late, so.
I was there for the whole thing this year.
Yeah, the reason I didn't go this year is because I had the Springfield Author, the Author Fest, and then I gave a panel on zombies at the Springfield Game Convention. But Springfield Author Fair is at the library. I saw total of one book there.
That's
one book, but like then there's this nice old lady who's just this is just so great. Tell me, what do you know about crop circles? Do you think they're real? Just literally, like...
What do you say to that?
I have heard of crop circles. Do you think they're real? No, I kind of think, well, they bend the stalks so the plant doesn't bend. Well, I think they figured out how they do that, and there's a way oh, really? Well, that's interesting. And then, yeah.
I'm like, what the hell was that?
Oh, my God. It's just like an out-of-body experience. And, yeah, later on, I saw her, like, there were two, like, we were up, just lined up on this corridor, you know, authors on both sides, and she was just going down the road talking to every author, and just like half an hour later I could see her talking to someone 2 tables down. I'm just like, thank God I did not entertain her. Like, Jesus Christ. Oh well.
No, anyway. I also used the trip to go to the World War I museum in Kansas City.
Oh man, I really want to see that.
Oh, it's very awesome. Especially when you actually see they have a shell casing from a Big Bertha cannon.
Oh, really?
To let you know just how big that shell was.
Damn.
It's one of those, like, I could actually stand in it.
Wow.
And I'm like, whoa.
That would kill some people.
Yeah.
That probably did kill some people.
Yeah, and even funny, they also had on display something I saw on Engineering Disasters on the History Channel.
Yeah.
What is largely believed to be the worst machine gun ever built.
Okay.
Like the most flawed machine gun ever built.
Is it a pepper box?
It's called the Show.
Okay.
It's a French machine gun with a kind of a crescent-shaped magazine.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing is, it's open in the middle.
Yeah.
So any dirt or rain that got in there would render it useless. They say it jammed constantly, and none of the parts were manufactured uniformly, so you couldn't take parts from one gun and use it in another. And in fact, Sergeant York, when it went over there, actually, he was quoted as asking about the show. He said, "Is there anything good about this gun?" And this French soldier said, "Well, if you break it down, you can use the parts to make a still. But that's it." And I got to see one right there.
Damn, that is pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's what
I really want to see it. So next time, I have to get up to Casey to see that. My first shout out will be for a book I'm reading. I'm about halfway through it. It's called New Tales of the Yellow Sign. It's by Robin Laws, the esteemed game designer and writer, and it's basically 8 different short stories. It's an anthology of short stories. It's not just one novel length story, all connected thematically somehow to The King in Yellow, to Robert W. Chambers' story. And it's great because Robin goes through very different genres. He goes through sort of a spy thing. He does a very interesting pastiche of Chambers' kind of 19th century, early 20s, late 19th century writing. That's actually set in a war that's very, oh man, he name drops stuff from the Repair of Reputations. Like you've read the Repair of Reputations, right? Or like, there's suicide booths in it.
Yeah.
Like he does a whole story about a guy who fixed suicide booths, and then like there was a revolution to throw off the king, to unthrone the King of America, and now he's dealing with other shit, and it's just crazy, like all kinds of, if you're a big fan of Carcosa, The King in Yellow, you'll love this. And even if you just like horror in general, there's like my favorite story so far is it has this great gimmick. It's written in the second person, like you're arguing with your girlfriend and you're doing the blah, blah, blah. Then you black out. There are times where you just don't remember what happened. So like you're talking to your girlfriend. Now you're in the car with your girlfriend with a little girl you don't remember. You're driving somewhere. Now you're in a cabin with the little girl and your girlfriend. Your girlfriend's talking to someone else on the phone. And you're like, who is this little girl? Did we kidnap her? Now you're running through the woods with the little girl, and you're like, and it's just like, oh my God, it's so good. So it's an ebook. It's $4 as a Kindle ebook. So just get it. It's not even that long. It's like 170. Anyways, so your second one, you were talking about
another. I was stand-up comedy. You know, that's a thing of mine. I mentioned Dylan Moran before from Black Books, Irish comedian I really like.
Yeah.
It's not brand new, but it's one of his acts called Like Totally.
Yeah.
And it's just him being himself, the chain smoking while perpetually drunk.
Yeah.
Comedy that I really love.
Yeah.
Really great stuff. Really great stuff. Just his delivery is just drunk Irish guy.
Nothing wrong with it.
It's really great.
Yeah, no, he's a very funny comedian, and I like his stuff. So, did you watch it on DVD or was it on TV?
It was on YouTube.
Okay.
Actually, I've ordered a couple more of his.
Oh, cool. I have to watch some of those. I want to mention something else I'm reading. Lucifer, the Vertigo comic.
Right.
Caleb has the entire series in trade paperbacks. I just borrowed his, and I've been reading through that, and I'm about 2/3.
Better when it's free.
Yeah. Well, it's better when it's actually printed because you have the pages and it's printed well. Anyways, it's a spinoff from Sandman, but it's written by Mike Carey. It's not Lucifer's written by Mike Carey, not Neil Gaiman. Well, it's based on the Gaiman's version of Lucifer. And so he's gone out of hell. He's abdicated the throne of hell. And what is he up to? And it's crazy modern fantasy kind of stuff, and it's, I don't know. I find it really interesting. What's interesting is they make all the supporting cast. It's not, Lucifer's the center of the series, but a lot of it isn't about Lucifer. It's about the people around him that he interacts with, that he barely talks to sometimes. And it's been a great ride so far. So
nice.
If you like Sandman, you'd like Lucifer too. So, and if you just like the idea of American Gods or Scion or those walking the real world and that kind of thing, you'll like this too. So anyway,
nice.
And finally, 2 video games I just beat recently on Steam. Costume Quest, which is from Double Fine. Since we're getting closer, we'll do a horror episode pretty soon. I'm sorry we went longer than usual without doing an episode. But Costume Quest is a Halloween-based game where you're playing a little kid. And you could so easily make this into a Monsters and Other Childish Things campaign. It's ridiculous. Like, instead of it, like, the idea is your sibling, your brother or your sister was kidnapped by monsters. You have to go get her or him. And if whenever you fight the monsters, whatever costume you're wearing, you turn into. So if you're wearing a robot costume, you turn into a robot. And then it's standard kind of Final Fantasy, like, which monster do you want to hit? And then, there's, like, sort of quick time events in order to maximize minimize damage.
Right.
And you build up charges to unleash special attacks. And you recruit friends who will come and help you. And like, one of the characters you can be is Lady Liberty. One of the costumes you can have is Lady Liberty, and like her special move is to heal everybody by just she just jumps forth and does the anime thing, holding up the torch out high, and it shows pictures of Abe Lincoln, and an eagle flies by. Nice. And there's a unicorn, and there's just let's see what else. I was usually the robot.
Yeah. Ross likes robots.
Well, the thing is that like some of the there's the fight screen, then there's the overhead screen where you just wander around, talk to people, and some of the costumes have special abilities for that. And like the special ability for the robot was that he had rocket roller skates, so he could run much faster than anyone else. I was just like, fuck walking, I'm just gonna run everywhere, so that was blah.
Yeah, I do like speeding things up.
Yeah. It's a short game altogether. There's a free expansion for it that comes with the game called Grubbins on Ice, which is sort of Christmas themed, but it's the same basic mechanics. But all beating both together takes 8 hours. I got all but 2 achievements.
Be crushed by his jolly boots of doom.
Well, by the Monster Kingdom, like I don't know. It's got their own convoluted thing, but it's Double Fine production. They did Psychonauts and a bunch of other great heavy metal, or what was that? What was that one with Jack Black in it that he voiced?
I know what you're talking. I just can't remember the name, but I know what you're talking about.
So it's good, high grade stuff. And then finally, FTL, which is a game that was, speaking of Kickstarter, on Kickstarter, is a video game where you're the crew. You control a spaceship as it goes through space, and you control all the crew members. And you have different. It's a little like Artemis, actually, Spaceship Simulator, where you can you have one guy in the pilot seat, one play in weapons and shields, and so on and so forth. And you have this message you have to get to the Federation before the evil rebel fleet comes and destroys everything. So you have to keep moving forward through 8 different levels or sectors. And every time you make a jump, you have some sort of random encounter. Like, you can fight guys, you can help people and get free stuff, and you're trying to upgrade your ship as much as possible and your crew as much as possible before you get to the final battle with the huge boss fight. So it's a roguelike game, so it's randomly generated, but it's an hour or 2 long at most, and it's really fun and really addicting. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
sounds like
you like
try.
it. I mean, one of the races are Mantis people.
Yeah, ever since Portal 2, Mantis Men. I'm rather happy with them.
So finally, we have the anecdote, which you can just ask if you have any questions about it. It's like, I'm just talking.
Yes, go ahead and describe your encounter, Ross.
So last week I got a chance to playtest D&D Next, which is, I didn't sign anything. It was the public playtest documents that Bill, who has been on several AP games, ran for a couple people. I didn't record it because I was lazy. I was at somebody else's house and I was lazy. So
good job.
We made level 1 characters. I played Mord Untermerten, the 5th, a noble fighter, a human fighter. So I had a strength of 21. Because I rolled an 18 for one stat, and I was just a straight up murder machine. Wielding a great sword.
But you were a noble.
Yeah, the way it works is you don't pick skills anymore. You pick a background, and the background will give you 3 skills and some other unique advantage. And like for the noble, you get 3 retainers. 3 servant guys will just do whatever you tell them to. They're not fighters or anything, but like. I'll take the servants who have to do what I say. Yes,
Yes, it's like meet me in the graveyard at midnight tonight. Bring 3 capable men such as yourselves.
Exactly. So Percival Duquesne and Barry Lyndon, where I called them. So I just min-maxed as much damage dealing as I could, and then John played a cleric, and then another guy, Jesse, played a wizard. And so we went in the Caverns of Chaos, which is a standard D&D adventure, and we went in like the one on the left side called D, or entrance D, and we just killed some goblins, got ambushed by some goblins, killed them. And
that's really what they're for.
Yeah. Then we went in the second room, tricked some goblins into going attacking orcs by making really good charisma checks.
Hey, you guys!
You know, it was basically, we're in charge here. Why aren't you attacking the orcs? Go and kill the orcs. Like, yes,
the word like, were we supposed to attack the orcs? Like,
why are the humans commanding us?
Like, they never tell us anything.
Yeah. So that was fun. And then we find a locked door, and we eventually like take off the hinges of the door just to pull it down. And the wizard, there's hobgoblins in there. And so the wizard is like, well, fuck it. I'll run into the center of the room and cast sleep or cause fear. No, I'll cast cause fear on all the hobgoblins, so they'll all go to sleep. And if I run into the center of the room, I can hit all of them at once. And he does that, and the GM explains, yeah, these hobgoblins have an ability that lets them ignore fear.
Whoops.
So the wizard was out of the rest of the time. He just got stabbed by these Spartan hobgoblins with long spears, and he got stabbed, and then
maybe kind of like that scene from Pulp Fiction where the guy runs out, just fires 6 shots, and they're just looking around.
Yeah. That was pretty much it. Only there were 7 hobgoblins instead of like 2. So there's 6 or 7 hobgoblins, and then John the cleric takes down one hobgoblin by casting Searing Light on him. But he gets taken down, and then it's only me left out of the 3, and I have 20 hit points, 16 AC, and I do like 12 damage on average per hit if I hit somebody. I have a +8 to hit. And so, because Bill rose so badly for all the hobgoblins, I actually kill 5 of them.
Wow.
I just kill all of the other goblins. I was down to 5 hit points by the end, but I chased down the one guy that was going to flee, and yeah.
It's like, he should have just gone, attendant, beverage.
Well, I actually didn't take the attendants on me into the actual dungeon because I was afraid they'd just get murdered. Although I should have, because they could have carried more of the loot, you know. But it was fun. So it was fun because we almost got total party killed, and we were being just totally stupid, like, yeah, fuck it, we'll go in. We kicked the door down and slit their throats. There was like a kid hobgoblin left, and I felt bad for him, so I just gave him the silver coins that I found, patted him on the head, and told him to be on his way. It's like, oh, this is awkward. I usually have people do this for me. You go away.
Oh yes, here you go. Yeah.
Yes. I just felt awkward about killing all of his uncles, basically. So, and then, but for me, it's interesting how they're balancing it in this 5th ed playtest. Basically, my guy, he had +8 to hit, 20 hit points, 16 AC, did a D12 plus a D6 plus 5 damage when he hit. Like, they have this thing called combat superiority where I could use this D6 die to either reduce damage from an attack or do an additional D6 on if I hit somebody. So I could choose what I wanted to do it on. So I usually used it to hit for damage just so I could, one-shot each hobgoblin. And it was... So the way it seems to me is they basically made me the equivalent of a 3rd level character and kept everybody else a 1st level character. I don't know, because otherwise the wizard had several abilities that were like, oh, if they fail their save, I win the fight. It's like save or die type effects. And the cleric could heal and, cast, and he was pretty balanced. But I min-maxed as much as I could as a fighter, and I, totally...
And God bless you, too.
Yeah. But it's interesting, that's how they're responding to this. Like in 3rd edition, the whole thing was wizards were better, spellcasters were better than non-spellcasters. And then 4th ed, everybody was balanced, but people started bitching that everybody had to do actual, pay attention to their abilities and the shit. So now in 5th ed, they're like, yeah, fighter, you don't have to pay attention, but here, we'll just give you more stats. We'll give you more damage, we'll give you all this other shit. So, I don't know. It's an interesting trend. Any thoughts on that, Tom?
I don't know. It kind of seems that they're just going back and forth trying to balance things out that may not be able to be balanced very well. And so
do you think a wizard can be balanced with a fighter in D&D?
I love 3.5 and I love Pathfinder, but I'm not blindly in love with it. And yes, I can acknowledge if you're playing a fighter,
why?
Why?
Yeah,
basically, why?
Like your choices are to attack or
not.
Yeah.
You're to attack or... Yeah.
Because wizard spellcasters literally get superpowers. Like I can turn invisible. I can fly. I can throw fireballs.
Yeah. And my favorite class, the druid,
yeah.
is like, I can do all this magic, and I can become giant animals that can inflict lots of damage.
Yeah. So you can be a fighter or a spellcaster, or you could do both at the same time, basically.
If you're going to be a fighter, if you want to use a sword and armor, why wouldn't you just be a cleric?
Yeah.
That's kind of the way I look at it. And eventually, all those, they get many more multiple attacks. Yeah, but your odds of hitting go down with each one.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's about versatility. So, I don't know. We played at level 1. We got to level 2. If we got enough experience to get to level 2. But so level 1, it seems kind of balanced right now, as it is, because by blatantly giving fighters more power, attacking power and everything, they kind of balance it out a little. So,
but I am not looking forward to buying more core books.
Well, I mean, I'll play. When Fifth Ed comes out, we'll play. We'll run it. We'll post APs of it. I don't know if we'll do. I don't think we'll do an entire super long campaign of it.
No, well, we tried Fourth Ed before we did a super long campaign.
Yeah,
and we agreed that hey, maybe we could do a campaign.
Yeah, and it worked out well. I think everybody will.
But I think it wasn't just it wasn't the system. That was because we had really great players and characters. I think.
Yeah,
I think the system was kind of secondary.
Yeah, by the end it was. I mean, beforehand, I think it was pretty important, but by the end, yeah, definitely. So,
that campaign was successful because we got along really well as a group.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how Fifth Ed shakes out. So I'm not. So if I playtest again, I'll talk about it here. But if it's something, but I'm not going to run a games of it. I'm certainly not going to post APs of it until the actual game is published, because I don't think it's fair to do that for a playtest. And everyone can get the playtest documents pretty easily. I think they're publicly available, or you just have to give them your email address or something like that. So it's not a big deal. So yeah. Anyway.
Okay.
This has been RPPR episode 78, Base Rating 101. And don't forget, contribute to Base Raiders, the Kickstarter, if you want to see us make really great books.
It's going to be awesome.
Yes. So we'll see you guys next time.